again. Welcome to Fun Grandma Stories. I'm Grandma Marilyn, and I wanted to share some things that I remember from when I was very small and we first had telephones. There are 5 kinds of telephones that I'd like to tell you that I remember because they used to be very different from what they are now. When I was little, my grandmother had a black phone that sat on a shelf in her hallway next to the kitchen, in between the kitchen and the family room. And this black phone had 3 numbers to it. Its phone number was 523. And it didn't work like today. If you wanted to make a call on that phone, you went to the phone and you picked it up. And someone at the other end, who was the operator, said, "Operator, how may I help you?" And you would say, "I would like number 726," or whatever your friend's number might be. There were 3 digits to the number, and the operator would then connect you. The tricky thing about this phone is it was on what was called a party line, meaning that all your neighbors, if they picked up their phone at the same time, they could hear you talking. Well, what do you do if you have an emergency? You can't call 911, so you pick up the phone. If somebody else is on it, you say, "Hey, I have an emergency. Can you hang up so the operator can connect me to the emergency number?" And so they would hang up, and then you could call the emergency number. So there were only a few of these phones in town. Usually maybe 3 or 4 people in town would have one. So if you needed to make a phone call, you had to go to their house to connect with the operator. That's when I was very little, long time ago. Then as I grew up and I was like maybe in 1st grade, we actually had a phone in our house. It was still one of those black phones, and by now it had 4 numbers to it. So it might have been 2468 was our phone number. And so you would pick up the phone again, and sometimes we had a rotary dial. It had a little circular thing where you put your finger in the 0 and run it around to the end and then let it come back. And that was for operator. The 0 was for operator. And the operator would pick up. And you could say, "I need number 3697 or whatever that phone number was, and she would connect you. But it was likely that these phones were quite expensive to have. Okay, you didn't buy them, you just rented them from the phone company. So the phone company owned them, and you could use them. If you were making a long distance call, it was very expensive. You had to pay for all your phone calls. And long distance, if you got a long distance call, the phone would ring, you pick it up, the operator would say, "I have a long distance call for you." And you would, "Will you accept the charges or do you accept the call?" And you would say yes. And then you were very quick to talk because it was very expensive to speak long distance. So usually those are very short calls. And maybe you only made 1 or 2 calls a day. Most people weren't on the phone. It was sort of an emergency thing. And maybe if you were sick or something, you would call the doctor. But that was what our phones were like then. They were starting to use the rotary dial, which meant you put your finger in and you moved it around to the number that you wanted it to be. And then the 3rd type of phone that I saw when I was a little bit older, they started to come out with colorful phones. All kinds of colors, all kinds of designs and styles. They were very fancy, and they have push buttons on them now. You didn't have the rotary dial anymore. You just pushed a button for the number. And we went to 7 digits, and everybody went, "Oh my heavens, 7 digits is so long for a phone number." But you didn't need the operator anymore, so you could do it yourself. And that was interesting. And then by the time that I was older, and that kind of phone lasted for a long time, like maybe 20 or 30 years. And then when I was starting to have my own children, and maybe I was 30 years old or so, this was 30 or 40 years later, they came up with what we call car phones. Now, car phone was like a phone that you could hold in your hand, but they were large. They were about this tall and about that wide. It took your hand big like this to hold the car phone. And why they were called that is you could put them in your car, and you could talk on your phone while you were in the car. And those were big old car phones, and those were pretty fun. And then everybody started getting car phones that they could just use at home, not have to be in the car, but they were still quite large. And so those had 10 digits. Oh my goodness, you had to do an area code and then the number. That was amazing. We were surprised. You could own your own phone then. You would buy your own phone and keep it in your car or in your house. And then gradually over time, and in the last 10 or 20 years, we've noticed that phones are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm sure you probably have your own phone, or your parents have a phone that you just hold in your hand. It's like a mini computer, or maybe it's a watch that you wear on your wrist. And those are the kinds of phones that we have today. I just wanted to share that with you. I hope you liked it. Thanks. Bye-bye.